Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video if you want to see more inspiring stories like this. Today, we're sharing a viral moment that reminds us what true leadership, mentorship, and integrity look like. You won't want to miss this one. The clip opens on a quiet courtroom. The air hums with reverence, not noise. Judge Paul L. Friedman leans forward slightly, his voice steady but soft, carrying the kind of authority that doesn't need to shout. "You've made me proud, more than you'll ever know." A ripple passes through the audience. Then applause, gentle, hesitant at first, then swelling into something that feels like release. For a brief moment, the bitterness of politics dissolves into something purer. The camera catches Jasmine Crockett's face, eyes glistening, smile trembling, pride and disbelief warring silently behind her composure. The video ends there, but the internet doesn't. Within hours, it's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram Reels loop the phrase over soft piano music, over heart emojis and captions that read, "We needed this." Hashtags bloom like wildfire. Mentor moment, nice Crockett rising. Still good people in power. Commentators call it a rare scene of humanity in politics. Others simply write, "Faith restored." And then, the moment flips from screen to soul. Clips of young law students tearing up. Civil rights veterans sharing stories of their own mentors. Someone tweets, "He saw her." Really saw her. The post racks up 1 million likes in 2 hours. Cut to Jasmine Crockett sitting in her office, a cup of tea growing cold beside her. The video plays again on her phone. She watches in silence, hand to her mouth, caught between pride and disbelief. For a long beat, she says nothing, just closes her eyes, lets the words land. "You've made me proud." A soft voiceover begins, calm and reverent, as if speaking for the collective audience. Few moments remind America what leadership feels like. This was one of them. A moment that didn't divide, didn't rage, just reminded us that grace still matters. The screen fades to black. The applause still echoes. The hashtags keep climbing. And beneath the surface of that tender exchange lies something bigger than the moment itself. Something that didn't happen overnight. And didn't begin here. Because behind this viral clip, behind every quiet smile, every proud nod, was a story that began long before the cameras rolled. In an America drowning in noise, it takes something extraordinary to make people stop scrolling. Every headline screams. Every debate feels like a cage match. Truth itself seems negotiable. Yet somehow, amid the chaos, a single sentence from an old judge to a young Congresswoman cut through the static like sunlight through smoke. "You've made me proud, more than you'll ever know." Why did it land so deeply? Because people are starved for sincerity, for decency that isn't performed, for connection that isn't scripted. It wasn't about partisanship or popularity. It was about something older, rarer, legacy. To understand why that moment hit like thunder, you have to understand the woman it was spoken to. Jasmine Crockett didn't come from political royalty or billionaire circles. She came from Texas grit, the kind that knows what struggle looks like up close. She began as a public defender, standing in cramped courtrooms where no cameras rolled, defending those who couldn't afford to be heard. Every late night, every dismissed case, every trembling client shaped her steel. Her colleagues called her relentless. Her opponents called her unpredictable, but everyone agreed she was impossible to intimidate. She carried the law like armor, and her words cut through pretense like a blade. From those courtrooms she rose, step by deliberate step, to the Texas legislature, then to the U.S. Congress. Along the way, she built a reputation not for theatrics, but for precision. Where others shouted, she dissected. Where others grandstanded, she stood her ground. And somewhere, far from the glare of social media, a man watched quietly. Judge Paul L. Friedman, federal judge, scholar, and mentor to more young lawyers than he could count. His reputation was that of calm wisdom, of principle without ego. In a political landscape built on sound bites, Friedman represented the forgotten rhythm of reason. When he saw Crockett's fire, tempered by discipline, wrapped in empathy, he saw something familiar. Something he feared was disappearing from public life, the kind of integrity that outlasts headlines. So when the moment finally came for him to speak, it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't strategy. It was recognition, a passing of the torch from one generation of justice to another. And that's what America felt in its chest when those words hit the internet. Not just affection, but relief. Relief that mentorship, decency, and growth could still go viral. That the old could honor the new without fear. That dignity could trend. In a time when every story seems to end with outrage, this one began with grace. And in that grace, people saw possibility. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's still a path forward built not on dominance but on trust. But that's not where this story truly begins. Because the connection between Friedman and Crockett didn't start with that viral clip, nor with politics at all. It began years earlier, in quiet corridors of justice. A moment long before the internet cared, when mentorship wasn't a headline, it was a lifeline. And what no one realized was how their paths had crossed before, in ways that would shape both their destinies. Jasmine Crockett stepped into the spotlight. But the spotlight was never warm. It was harsh, blinding, and judgmental. Every word she spoke seemed to invite scrutiny. Every gesture dissected for weakness. The villain of this story was not a single person. It was the system itself, a labyrinth of cynicism, amplified by 24-hour news cycles and social media mobs, determined to reduce her brilliance to sound bites and memes. The headlines were relentless. Too young, too ambitious, too loud. Each accusation coated with the subtle poison of gender and racial bias. Clips of her poised arguments in committees were looped endlessly, with snide commentary beneath. She thinks she's the boss? Interruptions in live debates became spectacles, as if her intellect were a challenge to be punished. Every condescending smirk, every deliberate pause by opponents, was captured, replayed, and magnified online. The mockery took a different form. Hashtags that twisted her name, GIFs edited to belittle her expressions, commentary threads that assumed arrogance where there was resolve, and audacity where there was principle. Trolls didn't debate. They caricatured. Influencers reduced her fight for justice into a caricature, and pundits treated every measured sentence as a calculated performance. Even the halls of power were not kind. Whispers of doubt followed her from office to office. Invitations to speak were scrutinized, her credentials questioned, her decisions second-guessed. The system she had entered to serve, the very institutions built to uphold fairness, often worked against her. And yet she did not yield. Through it all, Crockett's calm was her armor. Every slight, every interruption, every underhanded remark only honed her focus. The louder the world tried to drown her out, the clearer her voice became. Where others would rage, she paused. Where others would falter under cynicism, she leaned into her convictions. This constant storm of condescension and hostility was the crucible that forged her resilience. The chaos of punditry and online derision could never reach the core of who she was, the fire of intellect, discipline, and unwavering justice that defined her. And in stark contrast, the world's arrogance highlighted her dignity. Every attempt to belittle her, every mocking tone or viral clip, became a mirror reflecting her composure, her clarity, and her unshakable sense of purpose. It was in that contrast, the storm of arrogance surrounding her and the calm of her character, that her true power was revealed. But every storm has a calm center, a quiet force that watches, waits, and guides. And that center came in the form of a mentor she didn't expect. Jasmine Crockett's journey did not begin in the halls of power. It began in classrooms and courtrooms that demanded more than intellect. They demanded courage. She arrived at law school with notebooks full of questions and a heart full of purpose. Every lecture, every late-night study session, every moot court argument became another step on a path that few dared to walk. She studied not to impress but to prepare, to understand the machinery of justice so she could one day make it work for those who had been overlooked. Dismissed or silenced after graduation, she didn't choose prestige, she chose service. She became a public defender, standing shoulder to shoulder with clients whose lives teetered on the edge of neglect and misunderstanding. Small courtrooms, cramped offices, endless paperwork, these were her proving grounds. Each case was a test of skill and character, each client a reminder that the law is only as meaningful as the lives it touches. It was relentless work, and it was often thankless. Yet she moved through it with discipline, empathy, and a quiet determination that made her colleagues take notice. And then came the figure who would change the arc of her career, though he may not have known it at the time. Judge Paul L. Friedman, a man whose reputation preceded him, observed the young lawyers in his courtroom with a careful eye. He saw the ones who were ambitious, and he saw the ones who were principled. When Jasmine stepped before him, confident but humble, precise but compassionate, he noticed the rare combination of skill and integrity. She didn't seek applause. She sought justice. Their interactions were small at first. Brief courtroom exchanges, sharp questions met with measured answers. Friedman tested her, not out of skepticism but out of expectation. And Crockett responded consistently, not with defiance but with clarity and respect. In one early case, he asked a question meant to trip her up, and she didn't flinch. She explained her reasoning, acknowledged the gaps in evidence, and proposed a solution that satisfied both law and equity. Friedman's nod, subtle as it was, carried more weight than any public recognition ever could. Over time, these silent moments accumulated. Lessons were exchanged without fanfare. Friedman taught restraint, observation, and the power of quiet authority. Crockett taught persistence, courage, and the importance of moral clarity in the face of indifference. It was a mentorship built not on words alone but on shared experience, mutual respect, and the unspoken understanding that leadership requires both fire and discipline. Through these formative years, Crockett's reputation grew. Her victories were not celebrated in headlines, but in the lasting impact she made on the lives of those she defended. Every successful argument, every fair settlement, every client who found hope again became a brick in the foundation of her character. The public would see her as a rising star, but those who knew the journey understood. Her rise was no accident. It was the product of relentless preparation, moral courage, and guidance from a mentor who knew how to see potential when the world overlooked it. And then came the day that would test everything she had learned. Live, on the record, in front of millions. The room was electric, but not with celebration. It hummed with impatience, tension, and the subtle undercurrent of expectation, the kind that makes every word feel heavier than it is. Jasmine Crockett took her seat at the front of the hearing room, her hands folded lightly on the table, eyes scanning the faces of colleagues and critics alike. Cameras blinked on, microphones leaned forward, and the world outside waited to see if she would falter under the weight of scrutiny. From the opening gavel, the opposition wasted no time. Questions were sharp, sometimes bordering on hostility, veiled digs at her competence, her experience, even her identity. Interruptions came quickly, the familiar rhythm of undermining voices trying to rattle her confidence. A senator's condescending tone, a colleague's eye roll, a camera zooming in to catch a small flinch, every tactic designed to destabilize, to provoke. But Crockett had learned long ago that composure was more powerful than confrontation. She remembered Judge Friedman's words, spoken quietly, once in the hum of a courtroom that felt miles away from this chaos. The law isn't loud, it's steady. That phrase became a mantra, a grounding anchor in moments designed to unsettle her. So she leaned in, not with aggression, but with clarity. Every answer was precise, every rebuttal measured. Where others might raise voices, she raised reasoning. Where others would crumble under pressure, she used the weight to sharpen her focus. The room, alive with tension, began to sense the difference. Here was someone who could take heat without burning, who could stand firm while the storm swirled around her. The attacks intensified. Social media pundits live-tweeted every pause, every inflection, searching for weakness. Clips circulated within minutes, an edited highlight reel meant to paint her as defensive. But each snippet, instead of diminishing her, underscored the calm authority with which she carried herself. Commenters began noticing not her interruptions but her composure. Not the snide remarks, but the logical dismantling of them. Even in that high-pressure environment, her empathy never faltered. When colleagues hesitated, she allowed space for dialogue. When critics doubled down, she met them with facts, context, and patience. The room that had hoped to see her crack instead watched a masterclass in resilience and poise. And through it all, the rhythm of her mentor's lesson echoed in her mind. Steadiness wins where noise fails, dignity outlasts derision. The fire that had built her in courtrooms long ago had been tempered, and now under the harshest spotlight it burned with quiet, undeniable intensity. Every pointed question, every whispered doubt, every viral clip seemed designed to test her, and she passed each one with a mix of intellect, patience, and unshakable principle. The opposition had assumed her youth and background could be exploited. They assumed she would respond with emotion, with defensiveness, with anything that could be used against her. But they underestimated the years of silent preparation, the mentorship that had shaped her, and the core of discipline and conviction that now guided her every move. The hearing ended, but the tension lingered. Observers whispered among themselves, journalists furiously typed notes, and social media churned with debate. But Crockett's attention was elsewhere, in a quiet corner of her mind, waiting, listening, remembering the words that had always guided her. And then, like a bolt from a clear sky, it arrived. Judge Friedman's unexpected praise. It wasn't just a compliment. It wasn't just validation. It was a reckoning, a moment that would redefine the stakes in ways no one in the room yet understood. The lights of the auditorium softened. The chatter dimmed, and all attention fell on Judge Paul L. Friedman. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and spoke, not for the cameras, not for the headlines, but for the truth he had been watching quietly for years. "I've seen young leaders come and go," he said, his voice calm yet resonant, each word measured, each pause deliberate. "But Jasmine reminds me why I still believe." A hush rippled through the room. There were no exaggerated gestures, no applause cues, just the weight of sincerity. The moment stretched, intimate yet expansive, like a single beam of light cutting through fog. In that instant, the world outside the room began to catch its reflection. Journalists leaned forward, pens hovering above notebooks, fingers poised over keyboards. Social media accounts lit up, capturing the quote verbatim, dissecting its cadence, marveling at its clarity. "A rare moment of grace in politics," one headline read. Another, "Mentorship as leadership." Within minutes, the words were everywhere, shared, clipped, replayed, dissected, and celebrated. Hashtags trended: mentor moment, Crockett rising, still believe. Across the nation, audiences watched on screens both large and small. Students in classrooms, civil rights veterans in community halls, young professionals in crowded apartments. They paused, felt a flicker of hope, and shared the clip. Tears glistened on cheeks, quiet nods acknowledged. Whispers of admiration and belief passed from one viewer to another. Even those who had been critics found themselves stopping, listening, reconsidering. Trolls and cynics tried to pivot, to dissect tone, timing, intent, but the authenticity was unshakable. The calm authority, the unwavering gaze, the genuine pride in his words. They could not be clipped into mockery. For the first time in weeks, the loudness of outrage gave way to the quiet power of respect. And then came Crockett's response. She spoke softly, almost as if confiding in the world rather than addressing it. "He taught me that calm doesn't mean weak, it means certain." Her eyes glistened. Her words, simple yet profound, captured the essence of everything she had learned under Friedman's quiet guidance. It was humility meeting triumph, restraint meeting validation. The combination struck a chord far deeper than partisan divides or viral metrics could reach. News outlets ran feature pieces. Analysts dissected the leadership styles on display. Colleagues called to congratulate. Fellow politicians reposted the clip, some with reverence, others with newfound respect. The country, at least for a moment, collectively exhaled. People didn't just see two leaders. They saw a bridge between generations, a transmission of values, a reminder that mentorship could ripple farther than any speech or policy proposal. In communities across the nation, the clip was replayed in classrooms, offices, and living rooms. Children watched with wide eyes, absorbing a lesson they could hardly yet articulate. Leadership is not always loud. Victory is not always dramatic. And recognition can be transformative when it comes from someone who truly sees your potential. And throughout it all, Crockett remained grounded, embodying the lesson she had learned long before cameras and headlines. True power is measured not by applause but by composure. True validation is not in going viral, but in the quiet acknowledgement of someone who knows your worth. The moment lingered. It reverberated, spreading beyond politics, beyond fame, into the very heart of a nation hungry for authenticity. And yet, as the world celebrated, as hashtags climbed, and as conversations erupted across digital platforms, the weight of the moment pressed inward. Because this was more than recognition, more than pride. It was a reckoning. A reminder that what had just unfolded was the start of something far bigger. But what happened after those words were spoken would prove this was bigger than either of them. The clip spread like wildfire. Inboarded on screens across the country, it became impossible to ignore. On TikTok, users stitched their reactions. Tears in the corners of their eyes, smiles breaking across faces. The phrase, "I've seen young leaders come and go, but Jasmine reminds me why I still believe," looped in slow motion, set against soft piano music, captions of admiration cascading across the bottom of the screen. The viral nature wasn't just a metric. It was a cultural heartbeat. People didn't simply watch, they felt. Newsrooms scrambled. Commentators paused mid-broadcast, noting the simplicity and power of the words. "This," one anchor said, voice trembling slightly with awe, "might be the most wholesome moment in politics we've seen this year." Columns appeared overnight, reflecting on mentorship, authenticity, and the rare courage of leaders who lift others rather than tear them down. Analysts dissected it, not for strategy or spin, but for substance, examining how dignity, calm, and respect had gone viral in a world addicted to outrage. Within congressional offices, colleagues called one another, sharing the clip with whispered admiration. "Did you see her face?" one aide asked another. "The way she holds herself, steady, unshakable." Across hallways and break rooms, conversations turned to mentorship, legacy, and the rare power of being seen by someone who truly matters. The hashtags multiplied. Mentor moment, leadership with dignity, Crockett rising. On forums, long threads debated what made the moment so resonant. But beneath analysis and debate lay genuine emotion, a collective sigh of relief in a landscape dominated by cynicism. Even critics couldn't contain the shift entirely. Trolls tried to spin it, questioning intent, tone, timing. Cynics dissected syllables, tried to sow doubt. But their noise, harsh and clanging, was drowned out by authenticity. The warmth and truth in Friedman's praise, coupled with Crockett's humility, refused to be diminished. Every attempt to ridicule was met with renewed admiration, every effort to mock countered by the evidence of genuine leadership unfolding in real time. The lesson was clear. Sincerity cuts through even the densest fog of partisanship. Social media. Users created remixes, memes and videos that captured her measured nods, his quiet smile, their shared dignity. Twitter feeds filled with side-by-side comparisons of moments in history, where mentorship changed the course of a leader's life. People tweeted personal stories, parents showing the clip to children, students sharing it with mentors, colleagues, sending it as a reminder of why they fight for fairness every day. The ripple effect extended beyond politics into classrooms, law offices, and civic organizations. It became a teaching moment, a cultural artifact, a beacon. Journalists interviewed those who knew Crockett and Friedman personally. Legal peers recounted quiet hallway conversations, advice offered in confidence, lessons taught without fanfare. Former clients, community members, even young interns reflected on what it meant to see integrity celebrated publicly. For many, it was a validation of values long overlooked: service, humility, and unwavering commitment to justice. By the end of the week, the initial spike of virality had settled into something more enduring. The moment wasn't just watched, it was remembered. It became a point of reference for leadership that inspires rather than intimidates, for mentorship that uplifts rather than overshadows. And amid the endless commentary, the fleeting debates, and the swirling opinions, one truth began to rise above all else, persistent, undeniable, and deeply comforting. And in the silence that followed, one truth echoed louder than ever: The noise of politics began to fade, leaving a calm that felt almost unfamiliar. The headlines would change tomorrow, the debates would rage again, but the moment between Friedman and Crockett lingered, unshakable. It wasn't a spectacle, it wasn't a soundbite. It was a lesson, quiet yet profound, about what leadership could and should look like. Friedman's words and Crockett's response became symbols, not of individual fame, not of viral triumph, but of integrity and mentorship restored. They reminded a country exhausted by division that leadership was not about who could yell the loudest, who could dominate the narrative, or who could provoke the most outrage. Leadership, at its core, was about listening, learning, and lifting others. Across the nation, voices spoke. A teacher in Houston shared the clip with her students. This reminded me what leadership feels like. A young law clerk in Washington reflected in a blog post, "I've never seen humility and strength stand so firmly together." A mother tweeted, "My kids saw someone being recognized for doing the right thing, and they learned it matters more than winning arguments." The responses poured in, each one a testament to the resonance of authentic guidance, of mentorship that transcended politics and viral moments. And it was more than a moment of praise. It was a blueprint. People began to see how mentorship could transform careers, communities, and perhaps even the very culture of public service. Crockett's steadiness under pressure, Friedman's careful recognition of potential, the ripple effect through classrooms, offices, and living rooms, all combined to show that public service could still reflect dignity and purpose. The moral crystallized in a single undeniable truth: the strongest leaders aren't those who shout, but those who listen, learn, and lift others. Those who elevate others without diminishing themselves, who guide quietly without seeking applause, and who turn recognition into inspiration rather than vanity. In an era obsessed with noise, the quiet demonstration of mentorship, respect, and authenticity shone like a beacon. And as viewers across the nation absorbed this, a subtle realization emerged. The viral clip was more than a fleeting moment of pride. It was a mirror reflecting values many feared had been lost. It reminded people that integrity can be celebrated, that mentorship can still change lives, and that courage often comes wrapped in composure rather than spectacle. And maybe this moment wasn't just about Jasmine, but about all of us watching. The clip that captured Judge Friedman's pride and Jasmine Crockett's quiet strength was never meant to go viral. Yet in a world awash with outrage, it did. And it did so not because of spectacle or controversy, but because it reflected something profoundly human: recognition, mentorship, and the courage to lead with integrity. What started as a simple acknowledgement, "You've made me proud, more than you'll ever know," became a cultural mirror. People saw themselves in it, the mentors who had shaped them, the struggles that tested them, the moments when guidance and grace made all the difference. It reminded a nation weary of shouting that dignity still matters, that leadership can be calm, steady, and inspiring. In an era of outrage, two people reminded us that growth and gratitude still matter. One generation sees potential in the next. One mentor lifts a rising star. One act of genuine recognition ripples far beyond the room, the clip, or the headline. And now, the moment becomes ours to share, to honor, to amplify. If you believe integrity should go viral, share this story. Because mentorship doesn't just shape one career, it shapes a nation. It reminds us that leadership isn't about power alone, but about lifting others, passing the torch, and trusting in the next generation to carry forward the values that endure. So let this story live beyond the screen. Let it inspire your conversations, your actions, your communities. And let it be a reminder that, even in the chaos of politics and the din of social media, moments of truth, mentorship, and humility still have the power to change hearts, and perhaps even the course of a nation.